Welcome into Intercollegiate Conversations, as today we're pleased to be joined by the head baseball coach at Sacred Heart University, Pat Egan, for today's conversation. And Pat, I want to jump right in and talk to you about your career, where you started first as a pitcher on the mound, played professional baseball, and once that part of your career ended, you shifted over to the coaching side now as the head coach at Sacred Heart. Just take me through that transition. How'd you get into coaching? What was that like to make that move from player to coach, and then eventually, that path leading you to where you are now as the head coach at Sacred Heart?
Yeah, listen, Luke, first of all, thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here. My coaching story wasn't exactly planned out. When I was still playing professional baseball, that was, the avenue that I wanted to chase. And obviously, like most guys that, play this sport, we all have these dreams and aspirations of one day getting a chance to go play in the big leagues. And for me, I always kind of told myself I was gonna chase that dream as long as I could. And then life kind of hit me in the face a little bit, right? It was my wife and I bought a house. She was pregnant with our first kid. So my life was kind of changing in the direction that that was going. So as my playing career was kind of winding down, it was looking at what's, the next phase going to look like. And it just so happened as I'm kind of going through this process myself, John Delaney got named the head baseball coach at Quinnipiac University right after Skip Cooley retired, and it just happened to coincide with again this where I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to transition into. He picked the phone up, he gave me a call, asked me if I was interested, and listen, for a chance to get back and not only coach at my alma mater, but get a chance to join a staff with John Delaney, one of my best friends, and a guy that I had not only a lot of admiration for on the field, but just as a person in general. It seemed like a really easy thing to jump into. And at that point, I wasn't even sure if it was something that I was going to do for the next 15 or 20 years, or if it was kind of this, hey, we're going to kind of hang on to this idea for 2 or 3 years, and then we're going to see where this kind of goes. But as soon as I stepped back on the field and I was a player on the other side, or excuse me, a coach on the other side, it's got a different feel to it, obviously. But as soon as I kind of got a taste of it, I was like, this is exactly what I want to be doing for the rest of my life. Now, in terms of being a pitching coach versus possibly being a head coach, like that kind of has its own evolution for me. For 8 years, I was a pitching coach, and that's kind of the path that I always saw myself going down. And honestly, it wasn't really until John started getting some interest from some other programs and he went on some interviews with some other schools and institutions. And that kind of put me a little bit at a crossroads where if John ever ended up, taking a job somewhere else, would I follow him and go with him to the new school? Or, would I consider, becoming a head coach and staying at Quinnipiac and running my own program? I had not given it a lot of thought until those things started to unfold. But when I started to reflect and talk with my family and my wife about it, that's when I kind of knew it was like this head coaching thing is something that, I had strong feelings about and wanted to see where it could go. And, it never ended up happening at Quinnipiac, but then when the job opened up at Sacred Heart, it was a really good fit, at least from my perspective with, where I was in my life with my family, being right down the road from QU. It seemed like a really good opportunity and something I jumped at.
So, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but when you first started, like when you were playing, when you were pitching, was there ever that
Mhm.
thought in your mind of like, hey, when this is over, because obviously, everyone's playing career ends at some point. Was there that thought that I'll make the move to coaching, or it was just kind of that happenstance of things lined up and you gave it a shot?
That's it. Happenstance and things lined up. To be honest with you, it's like you get lost when you get into professional baseball. You sometimes get lost in, like Never Never Land, to be honest. It's like you never think that it's going to end. Assume that you're always going to have this opportunity year in and year out to continuously chase your dreams. Um, and for me, like I kind of steadily climbed the ladder in pro ball with the Baltimore Orioles and got to a position where I was um, getting close to knocking on the door and having an opportunity to make it to the big leagues. And so it always felt like I was right there. So my mind was solely focused on doing everything I could as a pitcher to try and achieve those goals and those dreams. And when the off season would hit, it was about getting my body and my arm ready for the next season. And that was always kind of this cycle that I was on. And coaching was never really a thought. And honestly, there wasn't a lot of thought put into just when my time on the baseball field was done, what was next. I was solely focused on, the present, or at least the very near future of like trying to attain the goals that I had set for myself. So again, it wasn't until, life started moving a little bit quicker. And when I was playing, minor league players weren't, uh, you know, we weren't rewarded financially all that well. They're a little bit better off now, but when we played, you definitely weren't getting rich playing minor league baseball for 7 years. So that was also a factor into, what are some of the next phases of life that I got to look towards. But yeah, coaching wasn't really a thought for a long period of time when I was playing.
When you were playing in college, when you were pitching at Quinnipiac, or even when you first got into coaching compared to now, how different do you think the industry is from the coaching perspective? Have you seen a lot of change even just in your own coaching career over the past decade?
Yeah, no question. I mean, the landscape of college coaching has changed, in the last couple of years. And you can really pinpoint since COVID and the transfer portal, that has changed the complexion of college coaching. Even in the time frame when I started coaching at QU in 2014, from those 7 or 8 years that I coached there, the landscape of college coaching has changed. So, reverting back to the early 2000s, and thinking about what college coaching was, what the recruiting process was like. They're just two completely different worlds. Now that you have all this technology at your disposal, being able to use social media to your advantage, being able to foster relationships with the travel baseball world. There's a lot more that goes into coaching at this level outside of just what you do on the field. Being able to build the program up the right way and finding the right players for your program. It's definitely a full-time, 12-month a year job that you got to invest in your program. So, I don't know if I can speak to the coaching back when, I was playing, and I just know that I had some really good coaches, and I was really thankful to play for Skip Cooley at that time, who actually taught me a lot and probably doesn't even realize how much he taught me. And I don't even know at that time if I recognized how important he was in my life outside of the support that he gave me day in and day out. But he helped kind of shape who I am as a coach today based on the way that he was for me as a player. So it's pretty funny just to kind of reflect back on things that happened over 20 years ago and how it's kind of shaped me into the coach I am today.
With that said, what's something you know now, having spent about a decade coaching, that maybe you wish you knew when you were getting in that, could be a good piece of advice to others that are maybe starting out in college coaching in baseball?
That's a great question. I think, when I first got into college coaching, the first year or two, I would say, from a developmental perspective, and definitely from the pitchers and even with the guys I interacted with on the position player side, I essentially knew this bucket of information that I learned from the coaches from professional baseball or at the collegiate level that I always try to impart on the players that I coach. That's kind of who we are. We round ourselves out by the people that are around us and who's influenced us in our careers. Now, nowadays, there is so much information out there for coaches to be able to utilize to their advantage. I think the biggest thing is being able to invest in the right information for coaches because I think it's a way to kind of grow your knowledge of the game. There's a lot of different languages that we need to speak nowadays because so many players have different coaches, hitting coaches, pitching coaches, coaches that they play for in high school and for travel, and everybody kind of talks a different language. So there is a little bit to being able to speak all those different languages. But I would just say this is that if, I am all about that growth mindset, trying to learn, trying to get better. But the important thing is investing in it the right way. I think sometimes as coaches, we can get a little caught up in trying to know a little about a lot of things instead of a lot about a few things. So just making sure that, whatever it is that you're trying to do to help facilitate, your growth mindset and get your players to be better, that you're just understanding the information more so than just having a lot of information for them. That's one of the most valuable things for me because there was definitely periods of my coaching tenure, especially at QU, where it was like I just wanted to know everything, and it was almost like I felt like I knew a lot, but I knew a lot about a lot. I knew a little about a lot, as opposed to really investing in a few different areas that I could have focused on a little bit better. That's one of those things that I definitely learned early on in my career that was really valuable for me.
You started your coaching career, as you said, at your alma mater, Quinnipiac, led to this opportunity currently with Sacred Heart. So it might be a little bit of a different answer for you, but in general, what do you think are some qualities coaches should look for in a school to know that that's the right environment to go, work for or work with?
That's a great question. For me, I'm just trying to get, a good sense of the people that I'm going to be working with, the institution that I'm going to be working for. Um, and it's almost a tough answer to give just because I've only been to two places. Like I've been to Quinnipiac and I've been to Sacred Heart, so I don't have a lot of references. Maybe some of these coaches that have spent time at different universities with different jobs and job titles, they can probably speak on it a little bit better. But at least for me, it was really important the type of people that I was going to surround myself with. But I think honestly, the number one factor, excuse me, is trying to find out what type of support you're going to have. I think getting an idea of where they see the program, what the future of the program looks like, any type of investment that they may or may not make will give you a good idea of when you do get that job, what are the expectations when you do get it. I knew right away when I sat down with the athletic director, Judy Ann, my baseball administrator, Greg Zulo, and even Mike Morrison. Like those were really genuine people that when I can have a conversation with them, they were not only very transparent about where the program is and what they saw as the future for the program. It made me feel really comfortable about knowing exactly what to expect when I walk through those doors. And it just kind of helps set you up for the right mindset with where you envision the program being able to move forward. So I would say just I'm trying to get a really good understanding of the people you're going to surround yourself with.
This is the question people always dislike because people don't really like to brag about themselves. But let me ask you, you were obviously a very talented pitcher. That led to you becoming a pitching coach, working with pitchers. Now you're a head coach. You've had immediate success at Sacred Heart. What do you think are the traits that have allowed you to be a successful baseball coach?
Well, I'm not. I'm going to be very blunt with this. Like this is just for me. The same thing goes with getting a really good understanding of who I'm going to be working for. But the people that I'm going to surround myself with was vital. Finding the right assistant coaches that were going to support, my vision and idea for where I thought this program was going to be, but that we were all going to be on the same page with moving it forward. So immediately when I went out and hired TK Kiernan, who's my assistant coach now, who was an assistant coach here prior to when I had gotten here. He had taken a year off where he was coaching a travel baseball program in Fairfield. He was one of these guys that I got to know on the road recruiting wise for a number of years. Great baseball mind, great person. I know that when he's going to be at the practice field, he's going to be bringing the same type of energy, the attitude that we're looking for as coaches that we want embodied in our players. And then being able to get to know a former player here, Isaiah Dubon, who was our second assistant. Like being able to find the right people that were going to have an impact on this program was easily the most important thing that I did. And then we all sat down in the room and we just kind of chopped it up about, our coaching philosophies and our ideas about how we can move this thing forward. And I think we've developed a really good, you know, working relationship that allows for us to kind of all be on the same page, but think independently of one another. And that's part of the reason I think things have worked out as well as they have, because, none of us sit in here trying to appease one another with what we think. It's everybody kind of has their own ideas and visions for how we want to try and continuously get better. And that's one of the reasons I think that we have gotten better really quickly is just because we've been able to come together and figure out how we want this thing to look, the type of kids that we want to recruit, the messaging that we want to send. And at the end of the day, for me, like it's so important. Investing in our players is more than just players on the field, but as people and as guys, as men that we're trying to develop. I wanted these guys to really understand how much we care about them, both on the field and off. And I think as an entire staff, like that's something that we've done extremely well for our players. I feel like they really understand that when we show up every day, that we're really invested in the team, but we're also invested in those guys individually.
I think that plays into my next question. I always ask everyone that we speak to about the importance of networking. I think it might be a
Mhm.
little different for you in the perspective that you were a known commodity, but based off of your answer, it seems like networking was big for you in filling out your staff there at Sacred Heart. So the general question being, how important is networking when it comes to college coaching?
It's vital. I mean, with whatever your dreams, goals, aspirations are when you get into this thing, like if this is what you want to do with your life, um, networking is one of the most important pieces I think coaches can do. Because this is essentially how TK and I kind of found each other, right? Like we're sitting together at in Northborough, Massachusetts at 10 o'clock at night on field two, sitting down on, sitting down in a couple of chairs while we're watching our 15th game of the day and our probably 70th of the weekend. You just spend time talking with one another. You talk about players and philosophy. Shoot, you talk about, basically everything under the sun, and you get to know each other on a personal basis. But being able to share in again, different ideas, philosophies, gets you a better sense of who they are as a coach. And, whenever those opportunities come up, like he was literally the first name that popped up in my head. And it wasn't even a second thought about it. So we spend so much time on the road. You cross paths with so many of the same coaches over and over again. That's one of the most important pieces, I think, is just being able to strike up a conversation with your fellow colleagues and just kind of talk shop a little bit, talk baseball. And I do think you are always kind of representing yourself, right? Like sometimes like, you always want to feel like you're putting your best foot forward when you are having these conversations with coaches. It doesn't mean you have to share intimate details of like your program and, give away some of the maybe the little trade secrets that you have that have made you or your program successful. But that networking piece is just vital in terms of growing those relationships that's going to hopefully help pay dividends down the road when maybe 2 or 3 years from that point, that same guy that you were talking to becomes a head coach or he becomes a hitting coach and they need a pitching guy. Who do you know? Who are some of the guys that you like and have had conversations with? Or can we look back and see what type of personal success that they had at their current institution? It allows for a lot of doors to remain open for you when you can network the right way.
Let me put you on the spot. What do you think's the best piece of advice you've been given? You've mentioned, you've played for a lot of good coaches. What do you think's the best piece of advice that you've been given that you still use or apply as a coach today?
Yeah, I'm not it's funny, like there is a lot in terms of how I handle myself with my team and my players, my messaging that has kind of all come from different coaches that I have played for, both in baseball and in basketball. And I'm talking all the way back to high school. It's something that I always try to remember how I would respond to the coaches that I played for and why. And that kind of helped build who I am as a coach now. But the single greatest piece of advice, this is going to sound crazy, but the single greatest piece of advice that I got is from Steve Malinowski, who was the head coach at the University of Hartford. He was an assistant coach under Justin Blood at the time. I want to say it was like 2017, 2018. Same deal. Like we were sitting at a field somewhere and we were talking about, and this is after the season had just finished up. They lost in their conference tournament. I think they went on a deep run. They lost in their conference tournament, and we're just talking about situations, what happened, just kind of recapping the conference tournament. And he said, they were playing in I can't remember if it was an elimination game, but it was eighth inning, ninth inning, and they had first and second. They needed to get a sac bunt down to move the runners over. And there was a guy in the batter's box that wasn't a very good bunter, but they obviously had to try and get him to put a sac bunt down. He doesn't get it down. He gets out, punches out, whatever the case may be. But they were, pissed off that he couldn't get the bunt down. They're frustrated that he couldn't execute. And, Steve reflected back on that moment. He said, I don't know why we're getting mad at him because in practice, he wasn't a very good bunter. We didn't spend enough time with him on trying to become a very good bunter for that situation. And he basically said, you need to put your players in a position to be successful, and we didn't do that. And I took that and I was like, that's a really profound statement in the sense that when you look at what you do with your team, your players, your pitchers, your position guys, your hitters, your defense, your team D, whatever it is, are you putting them in a position to be successful? Have you worked on whatever it is that you're going to ask of those players enough for them to be able to be good enough when the time comes for them to be able to execute, right? And the same kind of thing. Like if I, want to ask one of my, I don't know, one of my guys to lay down a drag bunt and, they can't do it and I get pissed that he can't do it. Well, how much time have we spent on him, with him to be able to execute and do that? So it just kind of is branched out now to all different facets of the way that I run this program is trying to make sure that whatever I expect our guys to be good at, like we're going to work on it, we're going to practice it, and make sure that we don't have an excuse why we can't do it when the game time comes.
We'll end on this. I'll run through as many quick hitters with you as I can in about 60 seconds just to
All
try
right.
to learn a little bit more about you.
Yep.
Who you listening to music-wise before a game to get ready?
Now or when I was a player, it has changed a lot.
Let's do when you were a player.
When I was a player, I'm probably going between Tupac, Biggie, and some techno.
Oh, wow. When you were a
Yeah.
player, any superstitions you had for each game?
Yeah, too many to name. You name it. Like I was as superstitious as it comes. It was the same socks, like being able to get dressed the same way. Was the same, shirt under my jersey. When I was a relief pitcher, I'd make sure I'd have to go into the locker room at the fifth inning of every single game because I had to take icy hot and rub that all over my elbow and shoulder to make sure the arm was primed and ready to go. I mean, there was a laundry list of things that I can go through. So I was very superstitious.
What hitter all time would you like to face the most as a pitcher?
Um, I would say first guy, Mo Vaughn. And the reason I say that is because he was one of my favorite players growing up. Because I was a big Red Sox fan and I loved emulating his stance in my front yard when I'd always swing with the wiffle ball bat. So I'm going to say him.
That might answer the next question, but which big league stadium would you have loved to pitch in the most?
Yeah, I mean, you can't, it doesn't get any better than Fenway Park. I don't care what anybody says. Like that place is unbelievable. And when you get a chance to walk up for the first time and like see the Green Monster, like there's nothing better in baseball than that.
What condiments do you put on a hot dog?
Ketchup and only ketchup.
Okay. Last two. First concert you ever went to?
First concert I ever went to was, I think it was a Jay-Z concert in Hartford.
And we'll end on this. Your biggest role model in life.
I'm gonna give you the old cliche that, it's my pops, it's my dad. He's one of those guys that he was my coach every step of the way when I was growing up as a kid. I really appreciated the fact, especially now when I reflect back on it, having a 10-year-old son, how he coached me as a coach and not my dad, and there wasn't any unfair treatment towards me. And it was I have an appreciation for that because I now understand how hard and difficult that can be, where it's, you're coaching your son and you want him to be successful. But at the end of the day, when you're a coach, that you got to make sure you have lines between those things. Yeah, and there's a lot of other things that my dad has obviously done throughout his life, both for me and he's just been a great role model every day that I've always looked up to and always wanted to make proud. So that was an easy one.
Thank you to Pat Egan, the head baseball coach at Sacred Heart University, for taking some time out to join us here on Intercollegiate Conversations to talk about his career and advice for others as well. And thank you to you for taking time out to watch our video. We ask that you subscribe to our YouTube page so that you don't miss any of our future conversations and content. We also suggest that you check out intercollegiate.co. It's the most comprehensive job board out there in college athletics. Until next time, life is just a series of hellos and goodbyes. So for now, we say goodbye.